good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin and welcome to another GameMaker tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to teach you guys some of the basic steps for debugging your games and some steps and precautions that you can take to make sure that you get less errors, that programming is less frustrating for you, that your development time is quicker, and you can build that game that you've always wanted to faster. As many of you know, I spend quite a bit of time answering YouTube comments, and because of that, I've seen some recurring themes that I think I'll be able to help you guys out with. I also wanted to mention that my Udemy course for GameMaker is on sale. Well, it's still on sale. You can get it in the description. There's a link in the description for $20 off. I tried to make that course quite a bit different from my YouTube content, and that it's quite a bit more extensive, and it takes you through the process of building an entire game from start to finish. So if that's something you're interested in, be sure and use the link in the description to get $20 off. But without further comments, let's move on to the video. The first tip that I'm going to give you is to make sure that your code is properly formatted, or formatted in a way that you would like it to be. This is very important. There's two categories that I want to talk about here. The first one is just style. So you can see I've got a script up right here, and it's a ledge grab state. In this script, there are two if statements. There's one right here and one right here, and they do different things inside of here. And I've got some comments here to describe to myself what each if statement checks for and what it does. One of the issues that I see very commonly is people forgetting a curly bracket, or putting a curly bracket in the wrong spot like this. And there are a few ways that you can make sure you're not doing this. One of them is if you put your if you click your mouse on a curly bracket, it will show you where its matching pair is, where the matching curly bracket is. You can see how these are highlighted in blue. So if I put mine on this one, you can see the matching pair is down here, which means this code right here is being run inside this if statement, and we don't want that. And it's easy to see by placing your mouse on that curly bracket. Another thing that you might do is you might style your code differently than I do. This might make it easier for you to tell where the curly brackets are if you put them aligned like this. And you always want to make sure that you indent the information inside of the curly bracket. So if I have another if statement in here, if and I would actually recommend ending your curly brackets before you type any of the code. That's also a good little tip for you if you type out your whole if statement like this. So if up do something here. But you can see we've tabbed over again. Now it doesn't really matter whether you decide to do your brackets like I do, like this, or whether you decide to do them the other way that I just showed you, but making sure you tab in like this is going to be very helpful in seeing where your if statements are, and then using this little tip where it shows you the difference between those two. The other thing I wanted to mention in this tip for styling is that, in format, is that you choose a naming convention. So you can see that all of my scripts are named, well, all of my sprites are named SPR_player idle. And keeping a naming convention, you can see I've got player hurt and player walk. What if I'd done this SPR walk player like that and changed my naming convention? That would make it very confusing later on, and I might forget. I might type it the other way because all the others are like this, and then I would get an error. So style and format is extremely important. It helps you to find bugs. It doesn't take too long. Take the time to clean up your code and make it look good like this, and it's going to save you hours and hours of headache in the long run. This second tip is going to be very short, but I just wanted to talk about auto-completion. GameMaker has an auto-completion feature, and it's super useful because it helps you to avoid typos in your code. So let's say we have an object. I have named my player object player with a capital P. And you can see that when I start typing out player, I get a nice little window here that pops up with an auto completion. If I hit enter, it will type out player. If I'm typing, for example, something really long, like doing something with the physics, these are some really long functions right here. And you can see that typing that all out on my own could possibly, I could possibly have a typo in there. So I can hit enter and it's going to auto-complete that entire thing for me. And then I can put both my parentheses in and my semicolon and then go back in and start adding the arguments into the script. It's really useful to complete this before you start adding arguments, because then you know you've got this, and it works with these too. You can see that they pair up. If I put my cursor right here on this one, it shows me the pairing parenthesis for that. And this argument takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or this script or function takes 5 arguments. So if I were typing this out, I would do, you know, whatever, I would do all 5 out like that. I got 6 actually. I do 5 like that, and you can see I don't have any errors over here anymore. But auto completion really helps you to make sure you don't get typos in your code. This next tip is also really short. It's on syntax highlighting. Now in GameMaker you can actually hit F10 inside of here and it turns off syntax highlighting. You can see all of my code is now white like this. So that is a possibility that you can do. If you hit F10 it will turn it back on. But syntax highlighting is very useful because it helps you avoid typos as well. If I'm typing image X scale and I accidentally mix up the S and the C like that, you can see image X scale is not going to be colored. It's not going to be highlighted, so I know that there's a mistake there and I've got a typo. So if you watch the syntax highlighting, it doesn't highlight everything. It won't do variables like this variable that I've created or this one right here, but it should highlight functions and arguments and your control statements like an if state or an if, like that. So syntax highlighting is also useful, and make sure that you use it while you're debugging your code. For this tip, we're going to talk about errors in your code action window right here. You can see up at the top there's a little button that has a 1 and a 0 and a 0 and a 1. If you turn that off, you can type anything in here and it won't show an error. But if you turn that on, click to turn it on, we're going to get a red marker over here on this side that's saying you've got an error, and down at the bottom it will say error at line 12 position 2, assignment operator expected. So what does that error message mean? Reading error messages can be pretty tricky, but you can see that we're at position 12 right here, and then line 2, it thinks it's over here. One thing you'll notice is that often it doesn't know exactly where the error is, because our error is, I mean, clearly right here. This is bogus. It's not anything here. And so it doesn't know exactly where the error is, but it normally knows within a couple of lines. So if I put an error up here, you can see it's going to put the error down here. So look within a couple of lines to see if you can spot your error right there. Now when we're reading it, we can see it expects an assignment operator. That just means you've got code there and it's expecting more. That's not enough for that line of code. Well, let's say we have an extra curly bracket right here. We're going to get an error and it's going to say unexpected symbol in expression, which just means we've got an extra symbol. Now if we take one out, it's going to say symbol curly bracket expected. So we're missing a curly bracket right there and we need to add one in. So these error messages can be very useful down here before you even run your game, to understand what is going on inside of GameMaker and to help you. So make sure you've got this little thing checked on. Make sure you read these error messages down here. Take just a couple minutes to look at your code within a few lines. Make sure you're not missing any brackets. Make sure you don't have like an extra quote. See, it says string unclosed. We've started a string, but we didn't close it. And now it's expecting an assignment operator. It's like, you don't know what you're doing right there. So those can be super helpful. Be sure and keep an eye on those, and they'll save you quite a bit of headache as well. Let's talk about compiler errors. Now this is the number one most common error that I see is an unknown variable. So let's say we have our code right here. I'm going to go into the player object, and I'm actually going to turn off full screen real quick because I think I have full screen turned on. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to mute my audio as well because I don't want the game audio to play. So I'm going to go into the player object, and I'm going to go into the step event. And inside of our create event, we have a variable called speed, and it's set to 8. Well, let's say just for whatever reason I want to change that inside of here. This doesn't really make sense, but change the speed variable. And I'm typing, and I type speed like this, SPD. Now if you see up here in the create event, SPD is lowercase, and down here I've used an uppercase S. Now GameMaker is going to see these as different variables, and the fact is that this variable doesn't actually exist in the game. So we're going to say SPD equals 10. Now we're not going to get a compiler error if we do this, because when we run the game, GameMaker is just going to set our speed to set that new variable speed to 10, right? Which is going to work. I need a controller here so I can press start real quick. It's going to work. We can move around, but our character's speed is not set to 10. It's still set to 8, which is what it was before. And that's because GameMaker sees these as different variables, and basically everything in GameMaker is case sensitive. You have to make sure that you use the correct one. So let's say that we have our speed like this, and we've now set the speed to 10. With the correct way, you can see our character moves faster than he did before. It's only a little bit though. What if we were trying to set our horizontal speed equal to our speed, but we were to type in speed, the large S, like that? You can see that we haven't created this variable. We're just trying to access it. We're trying to get at that variable and set it to this horizontal speed, but we haven't ever created that variable. It doesn't exist anywhere in our game. So what are we going to get? We're going to get an error message once we come to this room. It's going to say fatal error, action number 1 of step event for object player. So this is the first important thing you need to learn about reading error messages when you try and compile the game. That is that it tells you exactly where the error is. You can see it's in our object player, and it's in the step event. Now if we go down a little bit further, we've got a whole bunch of stuff here that's not going to make very much sense. It says push, execution error, variable get, and then it's got this number right here, dot speed, and then it's got other things over here at GML object player step normal event 1 line 8 h speed equals speed. Now there's a lot of information in there that you don't actually need, and it's important to learn how to pick out the pieces that are going to be useful to you. So we know it's in the player step event from up here where we can see that. We also know it's in action 1. Now action 1 just means the step event right here only has one action, so it's in the first action. Now we also know that it's trying to get a variable right here, and it's trying to get this variable SPD, and it also tells us what line it's at. It's at line 8, and that it shows us that line. It even shows us the line h speed equals speed. It's saying there's an error trying to get that variable. So why would there be an error with getting that variable? Well, it's because we haven't set that variable anywhere. So even though this doesn't make sense with this game, we're going to set the variable up here. We're going to set it, we're going to create, this is in the create event for the player object, because the player object is the one trying to access this variable. So we're going to create our variable in the create event, and we're going to initialize it spd equals 7. Okay, now we've created this variable and we've set it to a value of 7. So when we try and access the variable right here, it's going to say, oh, I know what that is. That's 7, because in the create event up here, you initialized it. So we can run the game again, and we can press start, and we will see that our you can see we constantly move to the right because we're setting the horizontal speed of the character. But now it works. We're not getting an error message anymore. So it's important to learn to read those error messages. If it says variable, if it's getting a variable get message, that means that you haven't created that variable yet that you're trying to access, and that you need to create it. But it also could mean that you just misspelled it, right? If we did hspeed equals speed like this, what if we meant to do the normal s right there? It's good news for you. The error message tells you exactly where the error is, and then you can go and see whether the variable just needs to be created and have that object in the room that creates the variable, or whether you just have a typo in it. So that's how you can start to learn to read those error messages. A lot of the time people see them and they're like, I can't read this. I have no idea what any of this means. Well, step through it a little bit and it should tell you where the error is. You can kind of look there. You can kind of start to learn what's going on and start to learn how to read these error messages, at least the information that's important to you for debugging that error. So that's going to be very useful. This, like I said, this is the #1 most I see this error all the time on YouTube. Probably like 25% of my comments are this error. This exact error message, cannot get variable so and so or whatever. So I'm going to be linking people to this video to try and help them out. But that's how you can do that and save you some time there. Let's get on to the next tip. Now we're going to talk about some basic debugging techniques when there's not an error message. Now you can see I've got a simple little code here that's I've got an object. All it has is a step event where we control this little character. And we've got a move right code. You can see I've been following all the other steps. I've got my code is nice and organized. I'm using comments. I'm using correct format. So I'm doing all the other steps right. But something's not right, and we'll see that in just a minute. So the first thing I'm doing is check to see if they're pressing the right key. If they are, move 3 pixels to the right. Make sure the character faces to the right, and then set our image for the animation speed, so it animates moving. We've got one for the left that's very similar, but it moves left. You can see -=3. We've got one for moving up. You can see I'm only doing 2 in the up and down just because of perspective. It's not really necessary. In fact, and I'm setting the image speed here. And then finally at the very end, there's a stop, which sets that if we're not pressing any of the keys, then we set the image index equal to 0. So it'll be the first image, the standing one. And then we set the image speed equal to 0 so it won't animate. He'll stop there. Right? Everything looks good as far as we can see. Now we're going to run the game. And you'll see what is going on. That's weird. It seems to be working, but when we move up, it stops. So there's weird stuff going on. And the biggest issue is that it seems like that our stopping isn't working because it doesn't stop animating. So it seems like our stopping isn't working. These all look good, but something must be wrong with our stopping. So let me teach you. In this case, there's 2 things that could be wrong. Either we've misspelled or done something wrong right here. I mean, maybe we did sprite index. instead of image index. That's possible because that would be something hard to notice. You know, so either we did something wrong down here, or there's something wrong with our if statement. Now we could look through all of it and we might find out what's wrong. But you can also just check. Let's check and see if we're even running this code. How do we check and see if we're even running a code? Well, the easiest way is to come into this if statement, and we're going to add a new line of code that's just show message. And I'm going to call it test. So this is going to tell us if we even run this code, because if we are running this code, we'll get a pop-up message that says test. So let's run it and see what happens. This is just very basic debugging practices. Okay, so you can see we're not pressing any of the directions, but it's not running our test code. But then when we press up, oh, we get the message. So it's running the test code when we press up. That's weird that it would run that code when we press up. So let's come back into it. So we know we're making it into this if statement, but only when we press up, not when we stop. We should be coming in here when we stop. So we know that there's something wrong with the if statement, because if there was something wrong with these, then it would show the message when we stopped. It would come up and show the message when we stopped. So let's look through here. It's weird that it doesn't work when we press the up key, or that it does work when we press the up key. So maybe we should check the up key over here. So here's our up key. What's different about this than about our other ones? Well, in order to check to see if we're not pressing a certain key, we put the pound sign or the exclamation mark before our check, the keyboard check. And look, our up key doesn't have that. You can see it's missing that exclamation point. And just using those basic debugging techniques that we used, where you can just do show message, see if it's even running your code. If you put a show message in an if statement and it never shows the message, then there's something wrong with your if statement, because you probably want that code inside of the if statement to be run sometimes in certain specific cases. If it does show the message, but at weird times, then you still need to check your if statement. If it shows the message at the correct time, when it's supposed to, then you'll need to check the code inside to make sure that it is working correctly. So you can use this sort of logical process to step through it and say, okay, let's show a message here. Is that code even being run? Yes, it is. Okay, let's try this next step. So you can come up with a plan and kind of step through it. Let's run our code now, make sure we fixed it. And let's see here. You can see we did fix it. Now our character stops when we let off the key. Everything's working. I like this cute little character. I designed it for Grain War, so it looks adorable in the game. There's some basic debugging techniques for you. Just doing a simple show message can save you a lot of time and headache to make sure you're in the right spot and you're checking the right piece of code and looking through the right pieces of code to find your error message. So hopefully this helps you, and let's get on to the next tip. Really quickly, I just wanted to show you guys, I was writing some code for the next tip, and I ran my game and I got an error message. So what I was doing, I was converting this to an H speed and a V speed method, where at the end we just add the H speed and the V speed to the X and the Y. You can see when I run my game, I'm going to get an error message, and it's quite normal to get error messages like this, but it says, let's read through it together. Step event of object imp, right? That's the only event I have. Action 1, it's the only action I have. Variable get H speed. Now it can't find the H speed variable. Now why might that be? Well, I'm setting the H speed variable right here, but only when I'm pressing one of the keyboard things. So basically it's trying to get the H speed variable, but it hasn't been set yet. And the best thing that we can do is just create the variable inside of a create event to make sure that it's set before we run the step event. So initialize the variables. That's why I almost always initialize variables in a create event, is so that they're ready for whatever step event. So H speed equals 0, and vSpeed equals 0. You can see now that I've initialized those variables inside of the create event, if I press F5 to run my game, I no longer get that error message and things work. So I just wanted to show you that because it popped up while I was working on this and I was like, that's relevant to what we're talking about. So let's do a quick example. So hopefully that was helpful, and let's move on to the next tip. Okay, in this tip, this is going to be the most complicated tip in the video, but it is very important, and I think a lot of GameMaker users don't recognize the power of the GameMaker Debugger. So that's what we're gonna be talking about, is the GameMaker Debugger. Now, I've got this simple code example from the last one. We have a create event which initializes a horizontal speed and a vertical speed, and then we have a step event which says, you know, if we're pressing the right key, set the horizontal speed to 3 and change the sprite and animate the sprite. If we're pressing the left key, set it to -3 and animate the sprite. And we've got up and down. And then at the end, we just do x plus equals the horizontal speed. So we add to our x position, whatever the horizontal speed is. And we've got a stop right here. Now this one's going to be rather obvious to you guys why it's not working probably. Which is that inside of this, we don't actually set the horizontal speed to 0 or the vertical speed to 0 inside of our stop script right here. But maybe you're making your game and you're going along and you forget to do that, and you run your game like this and you don't get an error message. These are the hardest bugs to fix, is when you don't get an error message. But you press and your guy doesn't animate right and he keeps sliding. He never stops. And he can only go at angles too. What's up with that? Like, he can only go at angles. So that's a really weird glitch. And you might not have a single clue what is going on and why everything is messed up. So let me show you how to use the GameMaker Debugger. Let's go into the step event. Now, what you can do inside of GameMaker that's really cool, and you can do this in other programming languages too, is you can set what's called a breakpoint, where it will actually stop. It would be running the game and it will stop the game and freeze it and put your code right up in front of you, and it will step through each line of code, and you can watch everything happen in the game and watch how stuff works on the code level. And that's really useful. So let me show you how to do that. Let's put a breakpoint, and I'm just going to put it right up here at the very top. And the way you put a breakpoint in GameMaker, there's two ways. You can right click and you can do toggle breakpoint like that. You can see it puts a little red marker right there. Or you can just hit F9 and that will do it. So let's put a breakpoint there. Now if you run your game normally, that breakpoint will never even show up. But if you press run in debug mode or F6, which also runs the game in debug mode, this is what's going to happen. It's going to run your game, and once it gets to that line of code where you put the breakpoint, it's going to freeze. Now you can see we put it on that if statement, so it hit that if statement immediately before it's even drawn any of the room. Let's move it real quick and just see what happens. Let's put it on the inside of the if statement. We'll put a breakpoint right there on the inside of the if statement. So it should only hit this breakpoint if we're pressing the right key, right? Because it's inside of the if statement. So I'm going to hit F6 and we're going to run the game again, and it's going to come up. This time it won't run, it won't freeze the game. It'll show it back here, but the game's not frozen. We can still move until I hit the right key. And you can see the game freezes and it brings us into the GameMaker Debugger and shows our code right here. Now let's close out of this because we actually want this on the 3 right here at the start. So I'm going to move our breakpoint up. So this way we can step through the entire step event. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to try and simplify this a bit. There's a lot more that goes into this that you can learn about. I forgot to hit F6. There's a lot more that goes into this that you can learn about, but in this example, I'm just going to go over the very basics and try and keep it simple for you so you can start using it and learning from it. So we froze. Now this is really cool because let's look at this window that we've got. We've got some different things. We've got our code right here, and you can see we've got an imp create event and an imp step event, and these are the different lines of code that it's already run. Now, the code looks a little bit different. It's got this weird thing up at the top, but don't worry about that. The rest of the code should look the same. You can see your breakpoint in the code. And over here on the right, we've got global variables. This game doesn't have any global variables, but we've also got local variables. Now that's really interesting, local variables. If we go under self right here, you can see we have an h speed and a v speed. Wow, that's cool. Those are the variables that we created for this object, and they're right in here. You can see they're both set to 0. So we can see what their value is right now. Now, this wouldn't be useful if we just stayed frozen here forever, but you can move your code along, and I'm just going to show you the first way to do that, and that's called a step in. There's also a step over and a step out. Those have to deal with functions and whether you want to step into the function or just step over it or step out of the function. But we're just going to use step in for now because technically step in will take you through everything. So let's use step in. We're going to step over, and you can see that we don't hit that because we're not pressing the right key in our code. With step again, we don't go inside of that. You can see this little yellow bar steps through each line of code. And we don't hit that. And we don't hit that because we're not pressing any of these. Now we should step into our stop code. Why? Because the stop code, the if statement should get executed. We should step in. See, yep, set the image index to 0 right there. Set the image speed to 0. And we add to the X position, add to the Y position, but both of our horizontal speed and V speed are 0. So we're technically not going to move at all. Now you can see we've gone through that entire step, and now it draws our game over here. If we're to click in the game and press the right key, I wonder if that would actually work. No, it doesn't. So we're gonna have to move our breakpoint so that we can get inside one of these and see what's going on. So let's move our breakpoint back inside the if statement. We're gonna put a breakpoint inside of here, and I'm gonna put multiple breakpoints. This will be now let's just put one there, and we'll put one inside of our stop right here. We'll put 2 in. Okay, let's run the game in debug mode again. You may have to stop your game. That's how you can stop it. Okay, so we hit the stop breakpoint. You know what? We need to take out that breakpoint. Actually, that's going to mess us up because we won't be able to get into the right key still. So F9, take out the stop. Okay. Let's run it. This is why a lot of people avoid GameMakers or debugging like this in general, because it can look really confusing at first. But once you get used to it, it's super nice. So you can see we can run our game right now, and we're not going to hit that breakpoint until we hit the right key. Then we hit the breakpoint. Now let's step through it. Currently, let's look at our variables. Our h speed is equal to -3 and our v speed is equal to 2. Okay. I guess we were pressing left and right, so let's step through this. Okay, it set our h speed equal to 3 because we pressed right. Before we were moving to the left, that was a -3. Now we press right, hit the breakpoint, and it set it to 3, so now we're moving to the right. Now if we step down through, it's going to skip that code, skip this code, skip that code, and it's not going to go into the stop event either because we were pressing the right key. So it's going to add to the X and Y position of the object and move the object. Okay, so we moved the object. Now we're back in the game again, and this time we're not pressing the right key anymore, but we're still stepping through our code. So you can see our horizontal speed is equal to 2 and our vertical speed is equal, or our horizontal speed is equal to 3 and our vertical speed is equal to 2. We can watch these variables, keep a close eye on them. Now we can step through our code. We step into the stop event, or the stop, right? But guess what? Our horizontal speed and our vertical speed are still set to 3 and 2. And now we're going to move the player again. We're going to update and move the player. And you can see he moves on the screen. You can actually watch it. It's kind of cool. As I step through it, you'll see it one step, one frame at a time, move the player on the other side of the screen. And our horizontal speed and our vertical speed are never getting set to 0, even though we're hitting our stop event. And you could do this in your game and watch stuff happen and say, oh, V speed equals 0, H speed equals 0. We need to make sure that we do that. And let's remove this breakpoint now and run the game. And it should work now. And that's the most useful thing about stepping through your game like that, is that you can see, you can watch it happen inside of your code. You can watch things change. You can watch the variables change. Make sure it's working. Make sure your code is going, make sure the computer is going where you want it to and where you expect it to. So this is a little bit longer of a tip, but it's really important. Hopefully this was useful to you. Hopefully you learned something and it was helpful. I just wanted to thank you guys for watching this video. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a bigger picture version of me for the end of this. So I will see you in the end section of this video. Thank you so much for watching this video with the 7 tips for debugging your GameMaker game. Hopefully, I'm going to move this mic real quick. Hopefully it was useful to you and you learned something, and it will save you some frustration as you're learning to program and growing as a programmer and a game developer. I know that GameMaker can be frustrating at some times, but this should help you along. If you're still having issues with your game or whatever, even after you've gone through this video and stepped through your code and taken some time to explain it to someone else, you can shoot me an email. One thing that I do want to mention, one last tip, if you want to Google this, Google rubber ducky debugging. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, but Google that, look it up, and see what that is. Basically just you have something that you explain your code to, or someone else you explain your code to. My wife is who I explain it to. She doesn't understand any code, but sometimes just me explaining it to her helps her to understand, or helps me to understand and find the errors in my code. So, but if you're still having issues, you can send me an email. My email address is heartbeast.studios@gmail.com, and I will do my best to help you. I try really hard to help people who are still learning and growing. It's normal to have errors and to have stuff that you can't figure out, but hopefully this video will help you. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure and like this video and share it on Facebook and Twitter, and share it with people who might be struggling with their code so they can start to learn these techniques and these steps that are going to help them be better programmers and better game developers. Thank you for watching again, and I will see you guys later.